The scorching sun of Monterrey always felt like a judgment, beating down on the marble facades of San Pedro Garza Garcia. It has been exactly 14 months since my life, carefully constructed over 3 decades, was dismantled brick by brick. My name is Alejandro Valdez, a man who once believed that loyalty was the currency of love, only to find himself bankrupt. I sat in my study, the air conditioning humming a low, artificial silence, staring at the empty, sprawling estate that was supposed to be our legacy. The silence was not peaceful. It was heavy with the ghosts of betrayal. My ex-wife, Isabella, had not just broken my heart. She had conspired to ruin me entirely. The divorce wasn't merely a separation of souls. It was a hostile takeover attempt orchestrated by her and her lover, a snake named Carlos who had posed as my business partner for years. But the deepest wound did not come from Isabella's infidelity or Carlos's greed. It came from my daughter, Sofia, during the court proceedings, when the sharks were circling and my assets were being frozen, based on fabricated evidence of embezzlement. I looked to Sofia for truth. I expected my 29-year-old daughter, whom I had funded through art school in Europe and whose lifestyle I sustained without question, to speak to my character. Instead, she stood before the judge, her eyes dry and cold, and echoed her mother's lies. She called me negligent, obsessed with work, and selfish. She justified Isabella's affair as a cry for help from a lonely woman. Sofia chose her side, securing her place in her mother's new world. Funded by the settlement money, they managed to claw out of my company. They left me with the house, a hollow shell, and a shattered reputation. However, they underestimated my resilience and my foresight. I had engaged Elena, a forensic accountant and private investigator who operated in the shadows of Mexico's corporate world. Elena was the one who salvaged what was left of my firm, finding the paper trail that proved Carlos's fraud just enough to keep me out of prison, though not enough to save my marriage or my relationship with Sofia. For the past year, I rebuilt my empire in silence, guided by Elena's sharp instincts and my own burning need for vindication. I cut all ties. No calls, no messages, no money transfers. I became a ghost to them. I assumed Sofia was living the high life with Isabella and Carlos in their penthouse in Mexico City, enjoying the spoils of their treachery. I was wrong. The past, as it turns out, is a predator that never stops hunting. The phone rang late on a Tuesday evening, shattering the calm I had fought so hard to establish. It was Sofia. My finger hovered over the decline button, a reflex born of self-preservation. But curiosity, or perhaps a lingering, foolish paternal instinct, made me answer. There was no greeting, no inquiry into my health, just a ragged, hysterical sobbing that sounded too desperate to be staged. She launched into a chaotic narrative, her words tripping over each other. Her husband, Mateo, the man she had married 6 years ago in a ceremony that cost me a fortune, had thrown her out. He had been cheating on her, she claimed, with her own best friend. The irony was so sharp it almost drew blood. She was now penniless, homeless, and terrified. She needed money for a lawyer. She needed a place to stay. She needed her father. Listening to Sofia describe her plight, I felt a detached coldness settle over me. She spoke of betrayal as if she were the first person in history to experience it, completely oblivious to the mirror she was holding up to her own past actions. She complained that Isabella, her mother, had refused to help. This was the first anomaly that triggered my suspicion. Isabella and Sofia had been inseparable allies in my destruction. Why would Isabella turn her back on her golden child now? Sofia claimed Isabella said their funds were tied up in investments and that living together would be awkward for Carlos. It sounded plausible on the surface. Isabella was notoriously selfish, but it felt wrong. Sofia demanded I send a car for her, demanded access to her old suite in the hacienda, demanded I fix her life just as I had done so many times before. I cut her off. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with her frantic shrieks. I told her that relying on me was a mistake she should have corrected a year ago. I reminded her of her testimony, of the words selfish and negligent she had branded me with to secure her mother's victory. I told her that she was an adult who had made her choices, and now she had to live in the reality she had helped create. I hung up before she could launch another round of manipulative tears. However, the detective in me Nurtured by months of working with Elena, couldn't just let it go. There was a piece of the puzzle missing. I called Elena immediately. I needed to know if this was genuine karma or a trap. Gustavo, a corrupt lawyer known as the Vulture, had been seen meeting with Carlos recently. If Gustavo was involved, nothing was accidental. Elena's investigation over the next 48 hours revealed a disturbing picture that was far more complex than a simple marital dispute. Mateo, Sofia's husband, hadn't just cheated. He had liquidated their joint accounts weeks ago. But the money hadn't gone to a mistress. Elena traced the funds to a shell company connected to Gustavo. Furthermore, Isabella and Carlos were not merely tight on cash. They were hemorrhaging money. Their investments were Ponzi schemes that had collapsed, and they were facing lawsuits from multiple investors. They were desperate. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. Sofia's expulsion from her marital home wasn't just a personal tragedy. It was a strategic move. They needed someone on the inside of my life again. They suspected I had rebuilt my wealth, which I had, and they needed access to my private study, my safe, and my digital keys. Sofia showed up at the gates of the estate 2 days later, dragging designer suitcases that looked scuffed and dirty. I watched her from the security monitors in my office. She looked broken, her makeup smeared, pounding on the heavy iron gates, screaming for her papa. It was a scene straight out of a telenovela, designed to tug at the heartstrings of a grieving father. But I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a survivor. I spoke to her through the intercom. I told her to leave. She begged, dropping to her knees in the dust, wailing that she had nowhere to go, that she was sorry, that she had been brainwashed. For a moment, my resolve wavered. She was my flesh and blood. But then Elena walked into the room and placed a tablet on my desk. It showed a text message log from Sofia's phone, intercepted just minutes ago. It was a message to Isabella. He hasn't opened the gate yet. What do I do? I can't keep this act up forever. Rage, cold and sharp as obsidian, replaced any lingering pity. Even in her lowest moment, Sofia was a willing participant in my destruction. She wasn't seeking shelter. She was an operative seeking infiltration. I activated the external speakers at the gate. I know about Gustavo, I said, my voice echoing across the driveway. I know about the shell company. And I know you are texting your mother right now. Sofia froze. Her head snapped up towards the camera, her expression shifting from sorrow to terrified realization. The act dropped instantly. She stood up, dusting off her knees, looking less like a lost child and more like a cornered animal. I continued, you have two choices. Sofia, you can stay there until the police arrive. I've already called them to report a trespasser and a potential corporate espionage suspect. Or you can tell Isabella that the game is over. She didn't wait for the police. She dragged her suitcases back to the road, making a frantic phone call as she walked away. It was painful to watch. A final confirmation that the daughter I raised was truly gone, replaced by a reflection of her mother's avarice. But the war wasn't over. I needed to end this threat permanently. With Elena's help, I compiled the evidence of Gustavo's money laundering and the fraudulent activities of Carlos's failing businesses. We didn't leak it to the press. That would be too messy. Instead, I sent a courier to Isabella's penthouse with a single dossier. It contained proof that Carlos was planning to flee the country without her, using the last of their remaining liquid assets, funds he had stolen from her own hidden stash. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for them. Within hours, reports came in of a domestic disturbance at Isabella's residence. Carlos had tried to run. Isabella had attacked him, and the police were involved. Amidst the chaos, Isabella had no choice but to take Sofia in, not out of love, but out of necessity. They were all sinking together on the same ship. I received one final message from Sofia a week later. It wasn't an apology. It was a hateful, venomous text blaming me for ruining their family yet again, accusing me of being heartless for exposing Carlos and leaving them destitute. She failed to see that they had planted the dynamite. I merely lit the fuse to protect my own home. 6 months have passed since that day. The silence in my hacienda is no longer heavy. It is serene. I have started a new venture with Elena, a partnership built on transparency and trust, qualities I now value above all else. We are slowly turning the estate into a foundation for young artists, a way to reclaim the legacy I thought lost. Sometimes, late at night, I think of Sofia. I don't feel anger anymore, only a distant pity. She defended her mother because love is blind, she said. She was right. Love made me blind to their nature for 30 years. But betrayal? Betrayal gave me sight. And now, with my eyes wide open, I can finally see a future that belongs only to me.